Welcome to Talking Dentures, where Simon answers all your questions about dentures.
Okay, yeah, so the question today is step by step Steve. And what Steve would like to know is, what is the process of getting a denture? What is the process of getting dentures, sorry. So, Steve, the process of getting dentures is not straightforward. There are quite a few steps involved, especially if they're done properly. If you're getting an NHS denture, you'll probably get it. There'll be less appointments usually than if you're having a private one done, especially if you're, seeing a clinical dental technician like myself, where I tend to do more steps to make sure that the end product is fit for purpose, that it's perfect, that it fits properly, that it functions properly, and it looks amazing. The process is, typically you have a first appointment, which is a consultation where you'll just have a chat to see, what's needed, what's necessary, whether we need a prescription, whether you need any other treatment before you have the denture made. So you might need some fill-ins or something like that, or extractions, etc. You might need temporary dentures. If you need temporary dentures, that adds, quite a long period to the whole denture process, because they need to be adjusted and your gums need chance to heal and things like that. But typically, if you're just having a straightforward denture, then the first appointment is that consultation. The second appointment, we'll put aside any other dentistry if you're seeing dentist and having any other work done, but just for the dentures, that second appointment with the clinician will be for first impressions, and those first impressions are usually done with a material called alginate. It's actually made from algae, so it's like a type of seaweed. It's the paste that's put in, it fills your mouth. It's not very nice, but it does set quite quickly. Especially the one we use a rapid set one, so it's only in the mouth for about 60 seconds, so it doesn't take long. Goes in, fills the mouth, takes the impression, we take it out, and then that impression is cast with plaster, so we then have a replica of your mouth that we can make the denture on. The problem with the alginate is it's very volatile, because it's a powder and water mixture. As soon as you've mixed it, you've got to get that plaster in there really quick. And this is the benefit of seeing a clinical dental technician, where they'll be able to have a laboratory on site and they get it cast up straight away. There are dental practices that have laboratories on site or very close that can get that mixed up quickly. But generally it gets sent away and it'll go in a box, and it might take a day or two before it's even cast up, and then you'll get distortion and things like that. So for that reason, we always take a secondary impression as well. For me personally, even though I cast those alginates up straight away, those first impressions straight away, I always do a secondary impression, which is a silicone based material. It's addition cured silicone, which means when it sets, there's no byproduct, so the material doesn't change or warp or distort at all. Once you've taken that impression, that silicone, it can sit on the side for years and it will not change. In fact, the mouth will change a lot quicker than the impression that you've taken with silicone will. So it's super accurate. It is a lot more expensive than the alginate, which might cost like £3 material, whereas the silicone might cost £30. There's a big price change there, which is why some clinicians won't use the silicone, because it's more difficult to use and it's a lot more expensive. They'll just do the first bit and use that, and sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't. In my experience, it's one of the main causes for dentures that don't fit. The biggest cause of dentures not fitting, the patients that come and see me, if let's just say it's an NHS denture, is that they've had teeth extracted and the denture's gone straight in. The mouth's then changed shape after a few weeks and then the denture just doesn't fit. The second most common, or maybe it's even the most common, is that alginate impressions are used and the alginate impressions have not been taken very well, or they've been taken extremely well, they're perfect, they've got all the detail in, they're in the tray properly, but just because of the time it's taken to get it from the mouth to being cast in plaster, even a slight shrink and distortion on there just means that denture isn't going to fit. It's going to need multiple adjustments, It's going to be painful. It's going to cause ulcers. It's not going to stay in place. It's going to fall and move around just because of the way that the impressions are done. I'm always explaining to dentists and other clinicians on my other YouTube channel the importance of silicone impressions and how it could just change the way that you're providing dentures for your patients. It's next level compared to just trying to use the cheap materials. Off on a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, but it's an important one, that about the impressions. So the next stage, once we've got those secondary impressions, we've got a really good model, then the next stage can take a little bit longer, especially if we're doing a metal framework for partials. We design a little metal framework on there, get that made up, and then we choose the teeth that are going to go on, thus put into wax and held onto that metal framework. Or if there's no metal framework, it's all wax. The teeth, the denture teeth that are going to be used, the actual teeth that are going to be used, are set into the wax that we then put in the try-in stage, so the patient can see what the teeth are going to look like. We can check the colour of those teeth, we can check the shade of them, we can check the length of the teeth and, you know, where they are in the mouth. We can check how it's supporting the face. We can check the bites of where they're closing, where they're touching, things like that. Make sure that everything's perfect. And if it is, we then go to the finish stage, which is typically a week later. If it's not quite right, if you're going to see a clinical dental technician like myself, then we would probably do any sort of adjustments chair side. So we might make teeth a little bit longer or shorter, or move them, or adjust the bite some way. If you're seeing a regular dentist, they might do that, or they might just send it back to the laboratory for the laboratory to do the changes, for a technician to do it, because they've got, typically a dentist won't have the right tools or maybe even a skill set to move the teeth on a denture. So they'll send it back to the laboratory, so that can slow it down quite a little bit. The only time that I usually send it back into the lab to have any changes made is if the colour's wrong, or because then all the teeth have got to be taken off with a different colour put on. So that could happen. Or I might do it if the bite's really out. Something has gone a little bit wrong with the bite registration on the previous appointment, and so then the teeth are not quite lining up. To be honest, that's very rare for me anyway. Very rarely do I get the teeth in the wrong position or get the bite in the wrong position, but it can happen. And the reason it might happen, in fact the most common, is the patient might posture where they're biting forward as if they're biting on their front teeth instead of biting on their back teeth where we want them. And if they haven't got any teeth, it's very difficult for the clinician to see exactly where that jaw is. You know, the baseline for the jaw, is it in that relaxed position where it's supposed to be? It's easy to miss, so sometimes it can happen, which is why we do the try-in stage, which is why we make sure that we do it all in wax, so we can check that it's all right before that final stage where we then process it into the acrylic and finally fit the denture. And once those dentures are fitted, if it's a standard type acrylic, they probably need some sort of adjustment on the occlusal surface. That's just like, you know, an odd cusp of the tooth might be hitting or something like that, or you might feel a little bit more pressure one side than the other. And if it's an injection moulded acrylic, we might still get that, but on a slightly less, just because the way that we process it is more accurate. So the short version is, it's first impressions, secondary impressions to make sure that those the models are better, a try-in to make sure that it's looking perfect, retry if we need it, and then the final, which is the fitting. I also do an aftercare appointment where I'm just getting the patient in after a week just to check to make sure that the denture's fitting exactly the way that it's supposed to be fitting, and there's no rubbing and sore like that, because there's nearly always some little adjustments that need doing. And by the way, it's not because the denture's made incorrectly. Nearly all dentures need adjustment. Nearly all full dentures need adjustment. If you've got a partial with just a couple of teeth, a little metal framework holding it in, probably won't need an adjustment. But if it's all soft tissue, as you can imagine, when you're biting, you're going to get soft tissue compression, and some tissue's going to compress more than others. Also, some tissue's a little bit thinner against the bone than others, so you get a little bit pinching, things like that. And it's There's no way of measuring that accurately. So there's a little bit of artistry to it, if you like, to do those little tweaks. That's different than if the impression's been taken completely wrong and the alginate's dried out or something like that, and then it's put in and it's digging in straight away, and then you end up with big ulcers and bleeding and things like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about little tiny areas that are just, the pressure's a little bit too much, so you might have to take off 0.5 millimetre or maybe 1 millimetre just to perfect it. I hope that answers your question. Was it Steve, step by step Steve? A little bit of a longer one, a little bit more of an in-depth one, but you found that useful, and we will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to send us your questions. There's a link in the description below. Bye!